For today's meditation, let us read from 1 Kings chapter 1, verses 5 to 10. Now Adonijah, the son of Haggith, exalted himself, saying, I will be king. And he prepared for himself chariots and horsemen, and 50 men to run before him. His father had never at any time displeased him by saying, Why have you done thus and so? He was also a very handsome man, and he was born next after Absalom. He conferred with Joab the son of Zeruiah and with Abiathar the priest. And they followed Adonijah and helped him. But Zadok the priest and Benaiah the son of Jehoiada and Nathan the prophet and Shimei and Rei and David's mighty men were not with Adonijah. Adonijah sacrificed sheep, oxen, and fattened cattle by the serpent's stone, which is beside En-rogel. And he invited all his brothers, the king's sons, and all the royal officials of Judah, but he did not invite Nathan the prophet, or Benaiah, or the mighty men, or Solomon his brother. In the scriptures, we see a recurring theme. Those who seek to exalt themselves often face a humbling downfall. This principle is clearly seen in the story of Adonijah from this chapter. His actions serve as a powerful reminder of the dangers of selfish ambition and the need for humility before God. Adonijah's desire to elevate himself to kingship was not driven by godly wisdom, but by what James calls earthly, unspiritual, and demonic wisdom. James warns us against the poison of selfish ambition and jealousy in chapter 3, where he says, For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and every vile practice. Adonijah's ambition was not rooted in seeking God's will, but in his own desire for power and influence. The wisdom from below often leads to destructive behaviors. Jealousy, bitterness, and selfish ambition are forces that wreak havoc in our hearts, and they can drive us to act in ways that bring disorder and destruction into our lives. This was true for Adonijah as he pursued his personal gain without regard for God's plan or even his father, King David. Adonijah's ambition was fueled by the failures in David's parenting. We read that his father had never at any time displeased him by asking, Why have you done thus and so? David's inaction as a father left Adonijah unchecked, much like his older brother Absalom before him. Both sons were described as handsome, charismatic, and influential, but without proper guidance, these traits led them to destructive paths. Proverbs 29:17 advises parents, Correct your son, and he will give you rest. Yes, he will give delight to your soul. Had David corrected Adonijah early on, the tragedy of Absalom might have taught him to avoid such a downfall. Unfortunately, David's failure to discipline his son allowed Adonijah's ambition to grow unchecked. As Adonijah's ambition grew, so did his rebellion. He took advantage of David's old age and inaction to declare himself king. He gathered support from key figures like Joab, David's former military commander, and Abiathar the priest. This was a calculated move to avoid those loyal to David, including Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, Benaiah, and David's mighty men. Joab's betrayal may have been fueled by the bitterness over David's decision to replace him with Amasa as the head of the army. Well, Abiathar may have been envious of Zadok, who held the position of high priest. This teaches us that jealousy and bitterness, left unchecked, can turn into hatred and betrayal. The desire to exalt oneself at the expense of others is a sure path to destruction. In the face of Adonijah's rebellion, God's plan for Solomon to become king was still in motion. Nathan the prophet acted swiftly to prevent further chaos. He advised Bathsheba to remind David of his promise that Solomon would succeed him as king. David, though old and frail, quickly recognized the need to act. He arranged for Solomon to be anointed king, ensuring that God's plan was fulfilled. David's decision to act immediately reflects Proverbs 15 verse 22. Without counsel, plan fail, but with many advisers, they succeed. His promptness prevented confusion, uncertainty, and bloodshed. It's a reminder that as followers of Christ, we must rely on wise counsel and take timely action, especially when the stakes are high. When Adonijah heard that Solomon had been anointed king, fear gripped him and his supporters. His guests, opportunists who hoped to benefit from his rise to power, quickly abandoned him when they realized the danger. Adonijah fled to the altar seeking sanctuary by grasping its horns. Solomon, in his wisdom, chose to show mercy, telling him, "Go to your home." However, this mercy was conditional and on Adonijah's future behavior. Despite his narrow escape from death, Adonijah's inner selfish ambition did not die. His lust for power resurfaced later, and in seeking to undermine Solomon again, he ultimately paid with his life. His story is a sobering warning that the seeds of selfish ambition, if not uprooted, can grow back even after apparent humility. The story teaches us several important lessons about pride, ambition, and humility. Adonijah's self-exaltation was driven by earthly wisdom, and it led to disorder, betrayal, and eventually his downfall. In contrast, true wisdom comes from above and produces peace, humility, and righteousness. We must examine our hearts and check for any selfish ambition or jealousy. Left unchecked, these attitudes can lead to destructive choices. As believers, we are called to humble ourselves before God and trust in His timing and plan for our lives. James tells us, "Humble yourself before the Lord and He will lift you up," in chapter 4, verse 10. Exalting ourselves may bring temporary satisfaction, but it will ultimately lead to humiliation. On the other hand, those who wait on the Lord and humble themselves will be exalted in His perfect timing. In Adonijah's story, we see the consequences of self-exaltation and the importance of submitting to God's will. May we learn from his mistakes and choose the path of humility, trusting that God in His time will lift us up. Let us remember the words of Peter in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 6. "Humble yourself, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time He may exalt you." God bless.